during this purification practice, which we will talk about, what you're doing is not pulling out the seeds. That won't happen until you realize emptiness, which is what we're going to get to, you know. You can't, you know, because, and we have to understand the logic, again, the logic, the mechanics of that. It's not just a religious belief. It's a practical issue. Because the cause of doing anything negative in the first place is because of attachment and delusions, and they are the main consequence of the root delusion, which is the belief in the self-existent me, which we'll talk about. As long as that belief is there, that's the main motor of all of samsara in total. So as long as that's there, you know, sometimes you'll have good lives, sometimes you have bad lives, you'll always be having some kind of life. We've got to cut the root of all the suffering, even the upper realms. And that's where we have to realize emptiness. So the purification practice is like putting atomic bombs on the seeds and on the weeds, but it doesn't pull them out yet. But when we realize emptiness, that's when we stop them from growing altogether, pulling out the root. We'll explain that as we go along. You with me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
She was talking about the negative, which we always focus on.
Yeah.
But on the positive,
Yes.
do you want to purify your positive karma too?
Okay, so purify means, from what you're hearing?
Cleaning up.
Right. So, a virtuous action is one that, a normal level, is one that where you benefit another, and it's an action motivated by a virtue. And that can only ripen as happiness. So strictly speaking, that means as long as you've still got ego grasping, as long as you still haven't realized emptiness, as long as you haven't cut the root of all of samsara, that'll keep ripening as nice things happening. But that's still in samsara. So to really cut the root of everything, so you are cutting the root of even the conventional happiness and all the suffering. But that doesn't mean, and then if you just did that much and you graduated at high school basically, you've achieved your own nirvana. You've stopped all the happiness and the suffering of a conventional level. But now, because you realise emptiness and you've removed all the delusions and you've perfected it, you're just going to be in a state of subtle bliss. That's the real happiness. Mind is completely pure and subtle. But if you're on the bodhisattva path, you'll very happily bop back again and take bags of bones, but for the sake of sentient beings. And you won't be get caught up in the rubbish anymore. Are you with me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's keep going. So I think it's really good that we, if karma, meaning action, first and foremost intention, motivated by delusion and followed through by body and speech, is negative ones are what causes suffering, then we have to understand karma and we have to understand the delusions. So we looked briefly at the law of karma, the 4 ways that our karma will ripen as suffering. Then we have to look at the delusions. They're the ones that are really important to get, because karma and delusions subsumed down to 1. So, it means we have to understand Buddha's model of the mind, which is profoundly different from the materialist. And until we start looking into it deeply, it won't really be evident to us. The crucial difference is the great scientists, using their microscopes and their brilliant minds, have unpacked and unravelled the workings of the brain. The Buddhist yogis and scientists, scholars, have unpacked the cognitive process itself of the thoughts, the cognitive process of the thoughts themselves. And this can only be done when you've got single-pointed concentration, because they've subdued the delusions to the point where they can have single-pointed concentration at a subtle level, and there they've been able to observe precisely and clearly and be able to label accurately and unpack and describe the workings of this highly complex cognitive process called conceptuality. It's a big surprise to us, and it's not at all how we think about the mind. And we won't understand this until we've studied Buddhist view of the mind. You read the commentaries on the cognitive process, and it's completely complex. It's completely fascinating. I mean, scientists would be blissed out if they could just get out of their head that the brain is the mind and look into the Buddhist view just out of interest and see the elaborateness of the way the conceptual mind works. It's beyond fascinating. It's extraordinary. And this is coming directly from the experience of these great yogis. First the Indians, then the Buddhists, It's amazing. So when you study the Buddhist texts about the mind. There's a text called Low Rig, Mind and Awareness. And it's got two parts to it. You learn the epistemological model of the mind, which is the actual way the mind functions, which is this sophisticated, interesting discussion I've just said that the yogis have presented in the teachings. Then you've got the psychological model, which is the contents of the mind. Love, compassion, all this business, you know. And we need to understand both. So there's one way of presenting the way the mind works, and that's in terms of mental consciousness, which is all the thoughts and feelings and emotions, and unconscious and subconscious. And then we have sensory consciousness, and already seeing the distinction between these two, extremely helpful in understanding the way Buddha says how we process everything. It's very interesting, you know. So a simple example I always use, you know, if I pick up this cup and I might go, I won't totally go, but I might go, oh, what a pretty cup. It's not bad. You understand? According to my taste, you know. That's a bit unnecessary, this rubbish down here. Don't need that. Unnecessary. Don't need it. Take that away. I'm a Steve Jobs fan. Get to the essence, you know. Well, not that I do, but I like him, I admire him. So, okay, I might go, there's a pretty cup. And we all will accept, without a question, will we not, that my eyes are seeing a pretty cup. I mean, this is totally how we believe, isn't it? If I say, you know, oh, Jim is so handsome. What I mean is my eyes are seeing a handsome person. Buddha says, what a load of nonsense. Your eyes aren't capable of such things. In fact, your eyes can't see anything. There's an eyeball. That doesn't cognize. The function of your mind is to cognize. Or the three words that are all synonymous for the job of your mind. To know, to be aware, or to cognize. They're all synonymous. Just bare bones, function of your mind. To cognize. So clearly the question has to be to cognize what? Well, guess what? That which exists, Buddha says, which is his whole deal. And why he says we have to cognize that which exists, because this is right now the neuroses are cognizing things that don't exist. That's what leads us up garden paths, which we'll talk about in a minute. But already here, massive mistake. For the Buddha, your consciousness is not physical by definition. So therefore, eyeball isn't just a bunch of yuck, you know. But without it, we can clearly see we can't have a cognition of something. So the eyeball is the medium, speaking Western terms, through which eye consciousness, which is that part of your mind, which is not physical, remember, that functions through the medium of the eyeball, the nerves, and blah, 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 you know, in Western view, that can therefore cognize something when it goes over here and looks at this thing here. So Buddha says eye consciousness, and indeed all the senses, they're very limited in their capacity for cognition. They're like dumb animals. They're profoundly limited. Eye consciousness can cognize precisely two things. You know, shape and colour. That's it. So what happens? Where does what a pretty cup come from? Oh, Jim is so handsome. Where does that come from? Well, guess what? And I love this analogy. It works perfectly. Quicker than Google, and I really mean it. The millisecond eyes meet shape and colour, because we've got it all stored in our mental consciousness. That's where the workshop is, as Lama Zopa says, and every millisecond of anything you've thought and said and done since beginningless time, surprisingly, is stored there. I mean, we don't remember 99% of today, and it's 11 o'clock. But Buddha says we have the capacity to recall all that we've seen, taste, touch and smelt since beginningless time, as well as indeed the minds of all beings. It's just the natural potential of minds. Right now we can't, because we're living at the grossest level, in this bag of bones, profoundly limited capacity for cognition. Even what we do remember is distorted, because we're so deluded, you know. But meanwhile here, eye consciousness can only cognize shape and colour instantaneously, quicker than Google triggers mental consciousness, where the workshop is, where all the information is stored. And if I haven't lost my memory, as we say, you know, if I can't access all those things stored away there, it means we've lost our memory. That means I won't remember what that is. But I do, millisecond, seemingly simultaneously, out comes the words, what a pretty cup. That's because I've dug up into my mental consciousness all the information stored quicker than the biggest Google in the universe, better organised than any computer, all the information that is stored there. My taste, my development, what I like, this is blue, that's a flower, that's a cup, that's a this, that's pretty, that's not nice. All my tastes that I've developed over the, you know, whatever. And out comes the view, what a pretty cup. Well, guess what it is? It's a conceptual story. It's a thought. It's a series of thoughts. A series of thoughts. An opinion. a viewpoint. Because Buddha says everything that goes on in the mental consciousness is indeed just that, a viewpoint, an opinion. And he would happen to say that some of those viewpoints or opinions are valid and some are not. And they're the ones that cause troubles. So this is where we have to look at the model of the mind, the way the mental consciousness functions. I mean, the contents of our mental consciousness. And it's a very simple model, deceptively simple. It's divided into three categories. Those states of mind that are called delusions, or negative states of mind, or generally non-virtues, or mental afflictions. But look up the dictionary. Another word for affliction is illness, mental illness. Don't be shocked. Disturbing emotion. These are all synonyms. Mental illness, mental affliction, afflictive emotion, disturbing emotion, delusion, neurotic emotion. Buddha would like that word. All these are synonymous, and these are for this one category. And these are the troublemakers. They are the cause of all suffering, period. And Mr. Buddha has found, amazing genius that he is, that we don't need the wretched things. They're adventitious. You can get rid of them. That's the point of all the Buddha's wisdom path, to get rid of the delusions. This is a shock. One of you might be a therapist, and I go to you and I ask for methods to get rid of all ego, all fears, all jealousy, all depression, all low self-esteem, and develop infinite love and infinite compassion for all beings all the time. You will definitely, diagnose me as deeply mentally ill. This is exactly what Buddha's saying. So don't just gloss it over as holy religion. Oh yeah, nirvana, This is what he means by nirvana. And it's a doable thing. By whom? By all sentient beings. He's done it. He's proved his point. He shows his methods, and there it is, This is what he's saying. It's a shocking concept. There's no concept remotely like that in materialist psychology. But why? Because we take as a given and an absolute necessity anger, attachment, jealousy, pride. As long as it's not out of control, you're an okay human being. This is the view in our world. It's a profoundly limited view. It's depressing for the Buddha. He says we're all mentally ill, and that these delusions are mental illnesses. It's a great word, mental illness. I mean, that's a stunning concept to us, mental illness. Well, you look up the word affliction, I haven't got my dictionary here, but you look up the word affliction, you'll see another term for it is illness. Well, they're mental illnesses. I think affliction's a medieval phrase, for God's sake. Who uses the word affliction? Nobody, except Buddhists. And His Holiness. But I prefer the word illness. It's a stunning concept, isn't it? You hear a word mental affliction, you're not quite touched, are you? You hear the word mental illness, you're a bit shocked, right? Isn't it? Who would have thought attachment's a mental illness? I mean, we don't think that. We think anger's normal until you become paranoid. Then you've got a mental illness. But Buddha says, no, having any anger at all is a mental illness. He's more radical in his view of what is mentally ill. That's all. Really, that's what he's saying. It's such a simple way to put it. Makes us stand up and listen. And he's saying, his point is, why he goes into this and why we have to put our hands in the you-know-what is because we can get rid of it. The only reason, if you couldn't get rid of it, I mean, how evil Buddha is to tell us to start looking at our minds. Why bother if you can't change it? You just get depressed. But he says you can get rid of it. That's the only reason to look at it and know it. The only reason to wade knee-deep in the stinky, polluted water is so you can identify what the pollution is, so the hell you can get rid of it. It's obvious, If you can't get rid of it, let it be and enjoy it. Stick the sugar in and be happy. Isn't it? Are we communicating? I feel I'm getting madder as I get older. I can't control myself. I thought I'd slow down as I got older, but I'm not. Like you, perky and everything. She's older than me, though. Anyway, never mind. Okay, so let's look at the delusions, these neuroses, these mental illnesses. But no, before we do that, let's get some hope. We've got the second category, which are called virtues. They're also opinions. This is very funny. They're also opinions, they're also viewpoints, but they happen to be relatively in sync with reality. I'll explain. They're the virtues. They're the virtuous states of mind, productive states of mind, valid states of mind. Relatively valid. They're not totally valid until we realise emptiness. We'll explain. Then you've got a whole bunch that are called neutral, which doesn't mean they're not important. These are vitally important states of mind. And everybody has these. So whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need concentration, you need not forgetfulness, you need vigilance, you need attention, you need discrimination. You need all these states of mind that are like the mechanics of the mind. They're crucial in order to do anything properly. So that's why they're called neutral. They're not negative in their nature. They're not virtuous in their nature, but they're fundamentally necessary to do anything at all. Can you hear that point? Thieves need mindfulness, as Lama Zopa likes to point out. That was what it means by neutral. Neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. But the virtuous and the non... So they're crucial. We've got to define... And we don't think like this. We think if we can't see the bit of the brain, we don't know what it is. Here we're talking a cognitive process called attention, intention, recognition. Each has a specific function, you know. And they're crucial to understand. Then you have the negative and the positive. And the very beginning stages of practice, well, actually in high school... We have to learn to control these. We're not paying much attention to the virtues yet. You're lessening the delusions. You're lessening the pollution. So just naturally what arises in its place is the virtues. And then in the compassion wing, you could argue, you then enhance the virtues, make them marvellous. You could say it like that. The first level of practice is called the practice of the morality of restraint. It's junior school and high school. First and second scopes of the Lam Rim, the wisdom wing, the Hinayana path. It's like you're being cautious. The very first level, junior school, you're backing off and stopping harming others. There's no real discussion of controlling your mind yet, just the beginnings of it, you could say. But the real emphasis is on controlling your body and controlling your speech and refraining from harming others. And then eventually, because you get the picture, you start to lessen the other actions driven by delusions which only harm you, not others as well, like eating too much and too much sex and drugs and rock and roll, because you make yourself berserk. Junior school. Now you've harnessed your energy enough, you can get to high school where you now learn about the model of the mind. You now learn about this marvellous view that these Indians came up with, which Buddha ran with and has perfected over the centuries, right up until today in the Tibetan monastic university system, where they use these same texts that began with these Indians, these amazing, brilliant thinkers, geniuses, who understand, have seen and have described the actual cognitive process itself, not the brain. The thoughts themselves. So we have to understand, therefore, the character of the negative ones, which you're going to home in on and focus on in in high school, in the second scope, when you start to meditate, concentration, and you start to learn the Buddhist model. You study it, and you then begin to identify all these maniac viewpoints, opinions, and see how they're wacko. They're not in sync with reality. That's Buddha's key point. There's two main characteristics these negative states of mind have, and these are very telling. The first one, and these are indicated by these various terms. Well, the term disturbing emotion immediately is so tasty. Disturbing, we know the meaning of disturbing. Check the last time you were jealous, angry, depressed, anxious, low self-esteem, arrogant. It was extremely disturbing for you. Just the having of it is disturbing. Look at it. It's so evident to anybody with half a brain. The second characteristic, which is the key one to understand to really get Buddha's deal, is indicated by this word delusion. And I have to say, in most of the other languages, I go around the other centres, you know, and there's no really good word in French, Italian, Hebrew, you know, for this Spanish, for this one, delusion. But it's a perfect word in English. It's like bullseye. Perfectly describes what Buddha is saying about these neurotic states of mind. That they're misconceptions. They're wrong views. They're elaborations. As Lama Zopa says, the delusions in the mind, starting with the root delusion, which we're heading to, all of them, attachment, there's a hierarchy of them, you could say. This is my way of putting it. There's a hierarchy. This root delusion is, as the word says, root, the mother of them all. Known simply as ignorance, but like all these words, it's got a very specific definition, or known colloquially as ego grasping, which gives rise to this craving, attachment to get what that fantasy I wants, which gives rise to anger or aversion or despair or panic or depression when it doesn't, which gives rise to jealousy and the other rubbish, you know. This is kind of hierarchy. There's actually thousands of them. We can narrow them down to the main ones, you know. They're all misconceptions. They're misconceptions. That means they're thoughts, their opinions, their viewpoints, remember? So, as Lama Rinpoche says, delusions decorate on top of what is there layers upon layers of characteristics that are not there. This is exactly what they do, all of them. This is the way they talk about the root delusion, ignorance. They talk in this way, that it's a misconception that elaborates things, that embellishes. But actually all the delusions function the same way. And once you can understand the way attachment works, anger, jealousy, all these ones, that how they function in this way, how they embellish their object, which means you're not seeing the actual thing as it is, even relatively, then we can really prepare ourselves, we are preparing ourselves to really understand the root delusion and how it functions, so that we can then realize the absence of it, which is emptiness. The absence of its object, the fantasy I. So this is a hard one, because when you see a person angry, what you see is a person with their body very involved, isn't it? Their body and speech are running rampant. Spit coming out the mouth, eyes wide like saucers, blood racing, you know, heart beating, words pouring out the mouth. Oh, she's angry, we'll say. All we're seeing is a person gone berserk with their body and speech. But then let's say another one of you, I'm getting asthma. I got asthma in my old age. I got suddenly in India one year. Never had it in my whole life. Maybe it's my comeuppance, because I have two sisters who had asthma. We didn't have enough beds, so we had to rotate sleeping together. Because I was impatient, and this asthmatic sister next to me, I'd suffocate them with pillows. They tell me. I don't remember. I was quite a bully, so I'm probably getting, my karma's ripening sooner. I'm just joking. Anyway. So, where are we? Delusions. We are, where were we? What happened? Delusions. Exaggerating. Anger, okay, person angry. So then another one, you know, one of you might not, it's a really big point actually, another one might, you know, one of you might not express your angry words. Okay, I remember that German fellow who ran that plane into the mountain, the Lufthansa branch, you know. People all said he was a typical German. I'm being respectful to Germans, I like Germans. Impeccable behaviour. Impeccable behaviour. No one would ever have seen there's an angry maniac. But when you hear of that thing that he did, I think you can deduce that his mind was pretty angry. I would suggest. Would you not? I mean, speaking simply, you know. I remember reading in the New York Times, this psychiatrist said, we can't presume to know what was going on in his mind. I beg your pardon, I think we can presume pretty well what was going on in his mind. It is not rocket science. A bit of negative karma with this particular group of people that he wanted to harm, karma to kill, strong ego grasping, precious sense of I, immense attachment to get what he wants, massive attachment to reputation, raging pride, unbelievable anger, but very controlled behaviour. That's how you present. I would suggest that's the Buddha's view. I think that's not rocket science. Do you see what I'm saying here? Because we think the mind's mysterious in the West, and because we think something happened to him in the past that caused this. So as soon as they get the psychiatrist onto him, what do? They start looking into the past, looking for a needle in a haystack. What happened in the past that caused this? We go back, you know, we can never find. Well, Buddha says you're looking in the wrong place, babe. The causes are in here, the mind. So, you'd never know by his behaviour until then that he had anger. But if he had enough courage to see that he was angry, he might have written down all his thoughts. My goodness, what thoughts they would have been. If you'd seen a transcript of one, you know, person angry who shouts and yells, and you transcribe their words, and the other person that fellow kindly writes down all his crazy thoughts, you would read those 2 bits of paper, and what you're going to see is sets of thoughts, aren't you? Well, guess what? That's what anger is. You know, the body's just the dress up. The part that harms others, unfortunately. Isn't it? The body and the speech. But the actual anger is in the mind. And you could see that his anger was probably 27 times stronger than that other kid screaming. So anger comes down to the mind. And what is it? Conceptions. Read the thoughts. What are you reading on a piece of paper? Words. What are words? Thoughts. And these thoughts are just embellishments, exaggerations, distortions, lies, delusions, misconceptions. These words are literal. Literal. Don't hear them as vague. They're literal. When we understand this function of our thoughts and feelings and emotions, we are bullseye on track understanding Buddhist psychology, understanding therefore the method of how to get rid of them, because they're conceptions. And this is going to prove enlightenment. This proves enlightenment. We can remove these thoughts from our mind, Buddha says, because these states of mind, he says, deep in the bones of our being, that are eons old, that are virtually instinctive, which are what inform our behaviour, they're adventitious, he says, which means they're not at the core of our being. Hear the words literally, please. Which means they can be removed. So what are you removing? Nothing abstract. You're removing, you're not even removing, you're simply arguing with these misconceptions and proving the truth, proving the truth by seeing how they're lies. This proves enlightenment. Okay, so if I tell you that I see that my cup is decorated with red ink, I just forgot the meaning of the word blue. Let's say I forgot the English word, and you go, "Don't be silly, Robina, it's blue." I go, "Oops-a-daisy, you're right, it's blue." That's possible, isn't it? So, would you agree that my cup has got red paint on it is a thought? You agree, don't you? And then you agree that my cup has got blue paint on it is also a thought, isn't it? So conventionally speaking, one of those is not true, is it? Right. Conventionally speaking, because we all agreed what blue means, and we all know that's blue, yeah? We've agreed upon it. It's convention. We've agreed. We've shaken hands, signed the contract. That's blue. So then you fix my mistake, and I go, "Oh, you're right." We know that's possible, don't we? So what happened to the thought? There is red paint on my cup. What happened to it? Very simply, what happened to it? Gone.
Gone.
And what made it go?
Reality.
Seeing truth. Seeing and believing in and recognizing the truth that it's red. Oh, sorry, wrong one. You get my point. Are you hearing? I'll say it again. I have a thought that says there's red. You say, "Don't be silly, Robina, that's blue." I go, "Oops, you're right," because I just made a mistake quickly. Well, what I did was, the thought, there is a red paint, and the thought, there is blue paint. They're both equal in being thoughts. Isn't it true? But one is a misconception and one is true. Well, the Buddha says, because it's a misconception, it can be removed. You don't force it out, you don't suffocate it, you don't pretend it's not there, you argue with it and replace it with a true thought. That's how you get enlightened. Because an enlightened mind is a mind that now has removed all lies from it. The lie that believes in the self-existent me, the biggest lie of all, the lie of attachment, the lie of anger, the lie of jealousy, the lie of all the other rubbish. Those lies have literally gone from the mind, replaced by the truth. That's enlightenment. This proves it logically. Taking these views of the mind, isn't it? It's not mystical. Not cross your fingers, hope for the best. I'm a good girl, I'll get rewarded. No, not like that. Read your brain. So that means you have to recognise what is a delusion, what is a virtue. And not absolute. We're just talking Buddha's model here. If you're studying Bach's music, and you're playing the piano, and you go, "How do I know I'm playing the right music?" Well, you just open your eyes and look at the music. It's pretty simple. It's right there, written for you. D. Oh no, that's F. Sorry, wrong one. Not, "Oh, is it right? Does it feel right? I'm sure it's right. Maybe it's right. I just trust it's right." Rubbish. That's mystical nonsense. You just look at the music on the piano. Well, same here. You take Buddha's model of the mind. You just look into your own mind. You go, "There's anger. How do you know it's anger?" Or look at the definition. A misconception that exaggerates the ugliness of somebody. Oh yeah, that makes sense. I've got that one. That's anger. There it is. Boom. It's like some cosmic trip. You're taking Buddha's model. You can choose Jung if you want. We're using Buddha's here. And you have that written on your piano. And there it is. You play the right notes and you practice until eventually you prove Buddha to be true. Are we communicating?
Yeah.
This is how you be a Buddhist. You're not really a Buddhist, they say, until you do this job. You can, that lovely story. Was it a teacher or somebody, and somebody comes up and says, "Oh, I just did my prostrations," and he says, "Yeah, I'm happy about that, but now go practice Dharma." So I circumambulated. I just circumambulated. I'm very happy, go practice Dharma. I did my this, I'm very happy, practice Dharma. What does he mean? Work on your mind. Change your mind. You don't become a real Buddhist until you enter junior school. You could say that. High school. Where you start the job. You're preparing yourself before that by taking refuge and abiding by the laws of karma. But you begin to actually be a Buddhist by changing your mind. That's his unique approach. By recognizing the delusions and stopping believing in them. Slowly weakening them with truth. Until eventually you prove that you've removed the root of them, which is ego grasping. And all the others fall away. is a logical, doable process, according to Buddha. So believe him, take it as a hypothesis, and then you do it slowly, and then as you go along, you've got to verify it is true and experience it for yourself each step of the way, like your music, like your cooking. Each step of the way, you verify and experience it. And if you get to a point where you don't, then indeed, as Dalai Lama says, Buddha's wrong, bye-bye, enjoyed your company, see you later, mate. I'm off. It's up to you. You're the boss. So we have to understand the delusions, therefore. We have to understand how they lie, what they observe, and how they're liars. And this is the most profound, the hardest one, even if we're not sure what they mean. As Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, you know, just to observe, to recognize that they're just decorating on top of what is there, characteristics that just aren't there. That's why Buddha very happily says we're mentally ill. You know, it's a great term. Illness, affliction, a mental illness. The tragedy is, bad enough, as Lama Zopa says, that things appear wrongly to us from habit, from countless lives. The worst thing is we believe it's true. And as he says, the vast majority of all humans on this earth have absolutely no idea that what goes on in their mind plays any role at all in their lives. This is the worst of the worst ignorance, the basis of such compassion for sentient beings. And then, you know, on top of that, even if we do recognize we have anger and jealousy and depression, we truly believe that I'm the victim of someone else's action or some event that caused it. So the feeling is a victim. The feeling is, poor me, how dare this happen? It's not my fault. So we look out there, all the brilliant neurologists and the brilliant neuroscientists and the brilliant psychologists, and they are marvellous, looking into the brain, the chemicals, the DNA, the events, the past, the actions of mummy and daddy and who knows what, to try and find the source of my depression, my anger, my jealousy, my fears. Buddha doesn't argue that external conditions don't play a huge role in our lives. He absolutely agrees. But he just says you're not getting to the source of it all, the actual source, which is your own mind itself. You know. Your own mind itself. So, you know, we go, why am I angry? Well, you know, you go, well, my mummy did this and daddy did this and my boyfriend did that. And that's probably true. They did. They did. And indeed your anger was a response to their action. It seems valid and true. But Buddha says you're not looking at the crucial, simple point. That the better way to answer that question, Robina, why am I angry? Well, Robina, darling, guess what? It's because you were angry before. Oh. Why was I angry before? Oh, I'm sorry to tell you, sweetie, you must have been angry before. God, why was I angry before? Well, you must have been angry before. But then why was I angry before? Well, you must have been angry before. And you won't ever find, well, there's the action that did it. Because it's beginningless. You get back to the first second of conception. Because you got back to, you know, when you came out the mother's womb, there you came out crying. That proves anger. If you didn't have anger, you'd come out smiling. Some babies do. Hello, world. Lama Ursula came out smiling. Most of us come out angry, scared out of our wits, this nightmarish, going through this narrow tunnel, like torture to children. I don't know why you all don't have, frankly, it's me being ridiculous again. I can't imagine why everybody doesn't have a cesarean, you know. I think it's cruel. If after the baby's born, you put it through a narrow tunnel that's equivalent to the tube that the baby came out of, you'd be put in prison for torturing your baby. But that's what birth is, isn't it? So it's a nightmarish experience. Never mind, I'll get carried away here. So naturally you come out kind of freaked out, don't you? Well, that's called anger. So you go, well, why was my baby angry when she came out the mother's womb? Well, she must have had the imprint of being angry from being angry before. And then you go back in the 7 months, or me in my case, 7 months in the womb. And you get back to the first second of conception. And why was there a tendency in my mind to be angry then? Because I brought it from the past. And why was I angry then? Because you were angry before. And we think there's a first moment. We desperately believe at 1,000,000,000% there has to be a first moment. And if we keep looking for the needle in the haystack, we'll find it. Buddha says, sorry guys, no such thing as first moment. Can't be. Product of cause and effect. There can't be an effect that didn't have a cause. So you will not find a first moment of anger. This is very depressing to us. So you look into your mind for the source of your anger, and it's simple. It's the tendency to be angry. Don't worry about beginning this. Go there to help you. No, there's no needle in a haystack out there. So naturally you come into this life with a tendency to be angry. The thing that comes along that is not what your attachment wants will trigger anger. Guess what? That's the cause of anger. So you just look in here. Don't worry about your psychiatrist. Don't need any money. This is free. Look into your own mind. It's my anger. It's my anger. And you soften yourself. And you have compassion for yourself instead of beat yourself up. And why am I angry? Because I was angry before, but if you want to go down into the evolution of it, as Lama Yeshe would put it, you look at the source of the anger, which is attachment, which is the frantic craving that the supposed I, gets what it wants. And what is the source of anger? The belief in the supposed I. So when you cut that, the lot crumbles into nothingness. This is the Buddhist way of being your own therapist. You go inside. Never mind what happened out in the past. Never mind dredging up all your memories. Never mind hypnosis. Who cares? Wasting time. Because when you get, as you do this job, and you get single point of concentration, and you lessen the delusions, you will get clairvoyance. No question. It's a natural part of your mind. It's natural potential. You'll eventually get that. Bucket loads of it. You'll see the past and the future and the minds of others eventually. All in good time. Using these methods of Buddhas. So we get to the root delusion, which is the supposed I. Why we have attachment is to get what that supposed I wants. And it's an I that Buddha says we believe in that doesn't exist. Very simple. Simple way to put it. So what does that mean? Well, there's different ways of seeing it. Like we talked first, by looking at the first level of dependent arising in the context of the two truths. There's dependent arising, which is how things exist conventionally. Then there's emptiness, which is how things exist ultimately, if you like, or how things don't exist. These are the shorthand: dependent arising and emptiness. So the first level of dependent arising is, you could say, argues with the position that the Hindus came up with, these amazing yogis, that Buddha argues with. The first point. They say there is a little self in there that's unchanging, that's not caused, and that is completely separate from the body and the mind. You've got body, mind, and spirit or soul, or as they call it, Atma, which is also the Christian view. And in Christian terms, it's a gift from God, isn't it? God puts that peace in there along with the body and the mind. And that's called your soul. And that's what defines us in Christian terms. So it's the way, this interpretation of that self-soul that Buddha argues with. The very first one, the first argument, which is the view of gross selflessness of the lower Buddhist schools of thought, the various schools of thought in Buddhism, argues with that one, the first one. That there isn't a little permanent, partless, little kind of thing in there. And the Buddha says there isn't one, not because he's being argumentative, because he says the way that is posited as existing is incorrect. There can't be this type of self. But let's forget that one. Let's go to the second one, which is a really tasty one, which is the gross selflessness for the school of thought that our lamas teach us, which is the one we're discussing here, which is the Prasangika Madhyamika, or it's the view of the middle way they talk about, the Mahayana, one of the views of the schools of thought, the way our lamas teach, and keep it simple. So this view, this is the grosser level of understanding emptiness, or dependent arising. The Buddha is saying that we totally believe 1,000,000,000% in the bones of our being, or this, more precise, the ignorance, the maripa, ignorance, ego grasping, the root delusion. What it precisely believes in, because you see, each delusion has its own object. Attachment believes in a very delicious cake. Anger believes in a very ugly ex-husband. The delusion, as Rama Zobi says, decorates on top of the husband, ugliness. Attachment decorates on top of the chocolate cake, deliciousness. So that's, delicious cake is the object of attachment. Ugly husband is the object of aversion. Well, ignorance underpins both of those. And ignorance causes the delicious cake to appear in and of itself, inherently, intrinsically, out there from its own side, delicious. As if you'd put a spoonful of deliciousness in the recipe along with the sugar and the flour. And I'm this innocent victim looking at it. It causes me to, well, what choice do I have? I've got to eat it. Look, it's a cake's fault. Shove it in, you know. And the anger, same. Anger, in my mind, causes ugly ex-husband to look ugly, as if ugliness is coursing in his veins along with his blood. He's out there. Not my fault. His fault. That's how it appears to us. We can see this. We know this. So the ignorance underpins the attachment and the aversion and makes it seem out there from its own side. Attachment makes it look delicious. Ignorance makes it cause it delicious from its own side. Anger makes him look ugly, and ignorance underpinning it makes him look ugly from his own side. Out there. Nothing to do with me. So here, this ignorance, this marikpa, unawareness, ignorance, the Buddha says, as His Holiness puts it, it's kind of got two functions. Bad enough that's regular, ordinary ignorance. That's easy peasy to fix. He didn't say this now, this is me. So, you know, if I think that's red, that's a simple mistake. It's called ignorance. It's not red, it's blue. But not only does ignorance not see the blue, it's made up the story that it's red and you believe in it like a vampire. So it's double trouble. If you said to me, what's that colour? Oh, I don't know. You say it's blue. Oh, thanks. Well, we'd be enlightened in a couple of years if it was like that. Because we're very clever. We'd learn quickly all the truth and there'd be no resistance to the truth and we'd get enlightened real easy, I would suggest. But the trouble with the ignorance is not only does it not see the truth, it's made up a lie. That's the exact opposite of the truth. And it's like ripping your skin off to even see that we're lying, you know. This is the pain, the painful part. So this ignorance, this maripa, this ego grasping, not only does it not know the truth, and which is here at the moment emptiness, and we'll go into that in a minute, not only does it not know the truth, but it's made up a lie. That there is a self that does exist from its own side, in there, somewhere, running the show. That's the truth. That's the lie that ignorance has made up. So not only are we ignorant of the truth, but this ignorance has made up a lie, and that's the lie we cling to. And it's like nightmare to stop believing in it. This is what Buddha's saying. That's why it's so hard. So we have to first recognise, don't we, what the lie is. And this is part of our problem. We just hear the words emptiness, we hear the word inherent, we hear the word no self-existence. We haven't got a clue what it means, so we just mystify it. Well, you know, as usual, we've got to, you know, unpack it all, learn the definitions, put the words together in coherent sentences, and then slowly the penny will drop. So let's look at the use of these words. It's so important for us, and these concepts, you know. We mystify them immediately because we haven't learned them, that's why, and then we assume they're mystical. This is a big mistake we make. But there's two levels of mistake. Forget the very first one, which is the one that the Hindus position. This school of thought doesn't even bother with that one. I mean, they do, but we won't go there. We'll go to the second level of dependent arising and the third level, which is the subtlest level. And these are the arguments we need to use to argue with ego grasping's misconception. The grosser level and the subtler. And so the grosser level, let's look at that one. The grosser level first. What Buddha's saying is this. I'll say we believe, but it's really the part of our mind that believes is called the ignorance, the ego grasping. The ego grasping within us believes 1,000,000,000% that there is, in here, among all the bits and pieces, you know, we're all made of bits and pieces, aren't we? Everything that exists is made of bits and pieces. They call them parts. So this belief in this one is there's a total belief that in here somewhere, sort of a vaguely kind of like sort of like one of the parts. We're not quite sure where, but we believe utterly it's there. And that part, as my friend Thupten Pende says, is walking hand in hand with the other parts called the nose, the anger, the love, the kindness, the jealousy, the knee, the joint, the pee-pee, the caca, the blood, the fear, the anger, the bliss, all those bits and pieces. We're made up of bits and pieces, right? Bits of body and bits of mind. There are millions of bits and pieces. Well, this belief, this ego grasping, believes there's a part in there called I. One piece called I. Walking hand in hand with the other pieces. But somehow it's more like a boss piece. It's like the puppeteer or the landlord or the big boss piece. If there is a piece, it's like the other pieces, but it's the boss piece. It runs the show, and its name is I. So the knee is named knee. The finger's named finger. The joint is called joint. The mind is called mind. Delusions are called anger and jealousy. Virtues are called love and kindness. Neutrals are called concentration and mindfulness. They're all the names of the bits that make up this thing here, this phenomenon. And there's the belief that there is one piece among all the other pieces, specific, really there, that is the boss, that is running the show, that does determine, that has pain, that owns a need, that is angry, that gets depressed, that is jealous and even can be enlightened. Rubbish, Buddha says. There can't be such a piece. And what we have to do is see the logic of how that is so, not just be mystified by it. We have to prove logically how there can't be that piece. There's millions of arguments that we have to learn and think about to use to argue with this misconception called ego grasping, to prove that it's not true. To prove that it's not true. So one of the arguments, as Rinpoche says, one of the arguments, if there were a part, so, for example, we can narrow down all the parts of ours. Even starting first. The universe, Buddha says, conventionally speaking, conventional truth, the universe is made up of billions of different distinct phenomena. So we first have to recognize the name of that phenomenon, then we have to all agree what it is. We don't just believe it. So what is the cup, mummy? Well, darling, it's a flat-bottomed clay container. You have to check flat-bottomed clay container. Then you use your eyes and you can prove that's true. But you have to hear the second part of its definition is tells you its job. Well, what does it do, mummy? Well, darling, it holds my tea. Well, don't just believe her. You have to prove it to be true. You get your tea and you pour. And guess what? You just proved that it fits its definition, that it holds my tea. So you've just proven the existence of a thing called cup. But it's not enough yet, as His Holiness says. You have to check. There are no other sort of conventional opinions which are valid about what it is that contradict that. If there aren't any, and even you've got to then prove there's no other views of anything inherent about it. But generally speaking, to prove there's no other contradictory view that is also true that contradicts this. Once you've discovered this, we've all signed the contract, shaken hands, so we can now begin to talk about a cup, because we have agreed that's a cup by convention. And in fact, this is leaping to merely label. This is leaping to the subtlest level of dependent arising, because Buddha says everything in the universe that does exist exists like this. Enlightenment, hell, good, bad, whatever it might be. You label it, you define it, you prove that it fits the definition, then you can begin to discuss it. You can't begin to discuss it until you've signed off on that. So conventionally, that's called a microphone. That's a book. That's a clock. That's a cup. This is a person. There are three words that are synonymous with the object called a person. The universe consists of all phenomena, objects of knowledge, existent, established base. There are 5 synonyms there for that which exists. So a phenomenon is a thing that exists. An established base, as they call it. This is the cup. We just established it to exist, didn't we? This is called a person. Or a self, or an I. So conventionally, those words are used synonymously. An I, a self, and a person. Conventionally, this is a self. This is an I. This is a person. These words are used conventionally. Conventionally, there is a person called Robina. Conventionally, there is a cup called cup. Now, the trouble is, even we get the words right, that's about it. From there on, we're in La La Land. But we start with this. So this is a person. So what Buddha's saying, like I said, well, we'll say it now, the two main parts of this person are body and mind, aren't they? We take Buddha's view, body and mind. Consciousness is not physical. It's one of the components, and indeed itself has got millions of parts, and then we've got a body. Body and mind are not the same. They work interdependently. So we've got a body and a mind. So as Lama Zopa says, if we can establish there is a body, this person does have a body, conventionally speaking. There's a body, hand, fingers, joints, blah, 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 you know. And this person has a mind. A person, you know, a sentient being is a mind possessor. So a person is made up of body and mind. But we think there's a third component called an I in there, a little self-existent, special little kind of little mummy I, a mini me who runs the show I, an extra piece, an embellishment, a decoration on top. We believe it. All our language expresses it. Buddha says it doesn't exist, not that one. So as Lama Zopa says, if there is that particular I, we'll go into how it would exist if it did exist. If it did exist, he says, well, it's really great. You know, I can go to work and body and mind can stay at home and have fun. For example. I mean, that sounds hilarious to us, doesn't it? Because we haven't defined how we think this I exists. So the crucial piece we have to understand here is the word independent and dependent. These are massively important in Buddhist philosophy. Massively important. Until we get our head around these, we won't get what Buddha means. So what he's saying is, everything exists, you know, certain things have a relationship. So cause and effect have a crucial relationship, don't they? You can't have a cause without an effect, etc., etc. Then other things, there's a natural relationship, you know, between certain phenomena. Meaning you can't have one without the other. So, okay, my table has a clock and a lid. Would you agree? Have a look over here. There's a clock and a lid. There's my table, one phenomenon, yeah? And it has a clock on it, look, and it has a lid, yeah? You agree with that? Mm-hmm. So that's three separate phenomena, would you agree? Mm-hmm. So, but they have no relationship. I can remove the clock and the table's not touched, is it? The table doesn't mind, does it? Can you see? So there's no relationship in that sense with them. There's no natural relationship. They're separate, independent phenomena. Do you hear that? Simple words. They're independent of each other. Simple. One doesn't depend on the other. And you take the lid away, the same thing. It's independent as well. The table's not affected, the lid's not affected. They're all independent phenomena to each other. You accept that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So my cup has a handle. Do you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But you can't possibly separate those. Where's the cup that owns the handle? Where's the cup that owns the blue paint? Where's the cup that owns the clay? Strip away the paint, strip away the clay, strip away the handle, and what have you got? What's left? Huh?
Parts. Yes.
You've only got parts. There's no little mini cup in there that owns all those bits, is there? Mm-hmm. So then the Buddha's saying that Robina does exist. And she exists in dependence upon her parts, just like the cup. So there's this natural relationship between Robina and her parts. You can't have Robina without the parts, and you can't have the parts without Robina. So the way that Buddha says, we think there is a piece that is separate and independent that is running the show. That's why if there is that piece, like, okay, Robina has a hand, like the cup has a handle, but you could say that the hand of Robina and the foot of Robina, they're independent. My foot does not rely on my hand, does it? Oh, there'll be lots of pain somewhere if they cut them off. But they don't rely on each other. You could say those parts are independent. Would you accept that? Yes. In terms of the object called Robina, there's a part called a hand and a part called a foot. You could argue that they're independent. Right? You agree with that? Mm-hmm. Okay, the two parts are independent of each other, but they're not independent of Robina. Right. But we think there's a part that is independent of Robina, that's like mini Robina that runs Robina and all the bits and pieces. It's not possible, Buddha says. It's plain silly, because that part would not be then, the cup is not affected by taking away the lid. I mean, the cup is not, the table is not affected by taking away the lid because they're independent. Well, if there is the part that we think is there, feels like it's independent of the parts. Well, if it were, the rest of the parts wouldn't mind if the self wandered off. Come back here, self. No, you could go to work and the body and the mind to relax at home and have fun. This is literally true. We can't hear it because we haven't articulated how we think this I that we believe is there. Look, when you're insulted, offended, hurt, fearful, I is the central player, like a nightmare. So the Buddha says it's not independent. It can't be. It can't be. Not being argumentative, saying it's not there. Because logically it can't be like that, independent. Because that one we're believing in here is a part that's independent of the rest. If there were, you could chuck it out. It doesn't make any difference. Your body and mind will be still fine. So it's an unnecessary embellishment, Buddha says, that we've made up. That's why it's full of panic and fear. My clock says 8. I don't know what happened to it. 9, 29, 30. What's going on? 11A. God knows what's happened. I can't know what the time is. What's the time?
11:47.
Who?
11:47.
Oh, it's lunch. So, okay. So lunch is the same. It's got no inherent lunch there. No, this is not the subtlest level. We're talking independent of the lunch. There's a little mini lunch in there. You sort of say that, that defines the lunch. No. And this quickly, for the sake of the rest of this discussion, we'll talk more after lunch. But this gets us. This is the grossest one. This is the grosser one. The subtler one, which is the only way Lama Zopa Rinpoche teaches, which is what you've got in here. You cannot find the I anywhere. The only way Lama Zopa teaches is the subtlest one, which is that there is no I in there, independent of anything, in particular the mind or the thought or the concept that calls it I. So this is the hardest
Say
one.
that again.
Okay, the term that's used for the subtlest level of dependent arising, which is the logic to prove emptiness, which is the level that Lama Zopa Rinpoche only ever teaches at, it's referred to as there is no inherent I. An inherent I here would be an I that does exist, that doesn't depend on anything, in particular that doesn't depend upon the mind labelling it I. Another way of putting this, that there is not one atom of meaning in a thing that mind hasn't given it. Merely labelled, it's called. But as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, just to finish with this thought, when we realised the absence of that I, the merely labelled, when we've realised the absence of the inherent I, when we've realised the absence of the non-merely labelled I, when we realise the emptiness of the non-merely labelled I, it's as if there is no I. Bah, he says, but there is. But what does exist is so subtle, it's as if it doesn't exist. It's as if it's an illusion. So as Lama Tsongkhapa says, from the side of the I, there is nothing that makes it an I. But, he says, and this is crucial, nevertheless, it does function as I. There's this tricky, like smoke and mirrors, putting together dependent arising, merely labelled, and emptiness of non-merely labelled. This is the subtlest one. The only level Lama Zopa Rinpoche teaches in. You listen to it. So we'll go into this later. So let's think of lunch as not an atom of inherent existence, not one atom. Don't believe a single thing you see. Don't believe in our karmic appearances, as Rinpoche says. So when you think of it as delicious nectar, we transform it into nectar with the blessing of the Buddha's body, speech and mind melting into it. Om Ahum, Om Ahum, Om Ahum. And then we offer it. So we think all the gurus, all the Buddhas, all the Bodhisattvas, all the holy beings, all the suffering sentient beings of all the realms of existence, pervading space. And we turn them all into our guru, as the Yidam, as Chenrezig. Trillions and trillions, pervading space, including our body. And then we think of them all experiencing the bliss of receiving this nectar, which is empty, and in the nature of bliss. Lama Sangye Lama Chodejin Lama Gedunte Kungi Jepo Lama Te Lama Namla Chupabu. So, teachings, lunch, discussion. You have any lunch? 1 to 30, 2:30, 12 to 1:30. Good, sounds like a good lunch break, doesn't it? Hour and a half. You happy enough for lunch? Then we have an hour discussion. That means I want you to go into little groups, no more than 2 or 3, and talk about any of the topics you've heard here, precisely. Often people say, "Oh, I don't know anything. I don't know what to discuss." But the way the debate works, it's very precise. If you both have been to the same class, let's say you've never heard this before, then you discuss precisely what you heard. No more and no less. That's it. You don't have to speculate or run off into your memories and talk about visions and dramas and like that. No, keep focused. If this were a cooking class, you'd discuss the recipe you just heard. So you've heard a few, so try and take one or more and discuss based on what you've heard. Don't speculate. It's really crucial to be like that. And as Geshe Tektok, my philosophy teacher, always would say, 25% comes from listening, but 75% comes from debating and thinking and meditating. It's really huge. Now, if you don't want to talk, you'd rather be silent, please be silent, no problem. But try not to just rabbit on about nothing. Either talk about this stuff, have fun, enjoy your lunch, and get to know each other, talk about the football, the weather, and the politicians, whatever you like. And the Mexico, even though you're looking at iPhones this morning, but the Mexico business wasn't as bad as they thought it went down. But I was thinking probably people like Lama Zarushe doing all their prayers, subduing all the elements. That's their job.